My life be like, ooh, yeah, ooh. My life be like, ooh, yeah, ooh. Yeah, ooh. My life be like, yeah, ooh. My life be like times like these that make you say, yeah, Lord, if you see me, please come my way.
From Baton Rouge, Louisiana, please welcome Peter Mata.
My life be like times like these that make me say, yeah, Lord, if you see me, please come my way. Like leaving breadcrumbs or when I stray. Yeah, I'm sacrificing the price you pay. Like living like a fingertip. Sometimes I fall, I slip. Yeah, more friends I need, more like you. Try not to put the fire with the things I do. Like times like these that make me say, yeah, Lord, if you see me, please come my way. Like leaving breadcrumbs or when I stray. Yeah, I'm sacrificing the price you pay. Like living like a fingertip. Sometimes I fall, I slip. Yeah, more friends I need, more like you.
Greetings. Welcome to the first great debate in sports on the Anox podcast. I will be the moderator for this debate and asking a question to our candidates. The format for this debate will include 3-minute responses by each candidate, followed by an open discussion portion of the answer where the candidates will have a chance to openly debate one another about the question at hand. The debate today will include 2 questions about basketball, 2 questions about football, and 2 wildcard questions. The questions were not distributed to the candidates beforehand, and they were not allowed to bring any notes to the debate. I would also like to please ask the audience to hold your applause and reaction until the end of the debate. The candidates have agreed to all these rules bestowed by the completely unbiased and objective Commission on Great Debate in Sports, and they are ready to get to it. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the 2 candidates. On one side, we have Mr. Ryan Rama, and on the other side, we have Mr. Peter Amata. Anox, welcome. Let's get to it. Starting first with the basketball questions. What are your thoughts on the current format of how players enter the NBA? Specifically, we would like to hear your thoughts on the draft and its eligibility, as well as the format of the G League currently. Would you change it at all? How and why? Just to let you know, this question is not asking anything particularly about the draft lottery and tanking. That'll be another discussion for another day. Mr. Rama, since you won the coin toss, we shall hear your response first.
Peter, I'd like to say I am absolutely first and foremost grateful to share the stage with you today and discuss these topics. Regarding the question, NBA. Currently right now, you have to be 19 years old or have played 1 full year at the collegiate level. It is a rule that has been changed over the course of the history of the NBA. However, I don't like it. The current rule as it stands, I hate it actually. And I'm not someone to use the word hate frequently, but I dislike it. I hate it. I think that any player who a team deems ready for the NBA should be able to get drafted. I mean, you look back at some of these players that have phenomenally impressed their with their entire body of their career, but have come straight out of high school, with the likes of Dwight Howard, Kevin Garnett, the late great Kobe Bryant. I mean, this is just Tracy McGrady. I can go on and on. I will not mention Kwame Brown, even though I just did, but he is someone that I personally should have probably not addressed, but shout out Kwame Brown for one of the outliers. I will say though, it's so much fun. And I remember it being so much fun watching these players, 17, 18-year-old boys come into the league and where a team will, put all their chips out to draft that player. I think that with that rule in place, being 19 or playing a year in college, I think that it takes a little bit of the fun and the rawness out of seeing some of these players come out of high school. I failed to mention LeBron James just right now. So LeBron James, you look at that, and within this last era, those are probably the 4 best players out of this era. And so I mentioned
Thank you for your response, Mr. Rama. Mr. Motto, we'll move to you on your response to this question.
I'm not done and I'm not finished, but I will wrap it up just out of respect for you, Peter, and for your side. But I will say that this rule is complete BS. We want to make sure that the players that are drafted, if a team is willing to draft them, to be drafted. We see all of these young talents on YouTube and they're fun to watch, and then they go to college and, you know, an injury happens here, an injury happens there, and then they just skyrocket, fall off the face of the earth. Average G League salary, I'll bring in G League just for a moment, if I may, Peter, if I may. G League salary for the course of a 5-month season is, I would say, $35,000 for those 5 months. I mean, no one's going to opt out and just take the G League route unless there are a lot of changes made for that. And then if you look at, you know, the overseas, there's just a lot of complications. And then I will bring in college basketball because I'm a big college basketball enthusiast as well as March Madness enthusiast. I will say that, yes, it will take away a little bit from the college experience, but the one and done has lessened that aspect as well as far as the enjoyment. If you look back at the last 10 Final Fours, and the last 10 number 1 overall picks, only 2 of the 10 number 1 picks even made it to the Final Four. So they're not even playing in for the most part. So I will say that if you're good enough to make an NBA team or have an NBA team draft you, you should be able to go to the NBA regardless of age. Peter, I'm sorry I took a little bit more time, but yes, that is my stance, and I firmly stand by it.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Rama. Mr. Motto, we'll move to you on your response to this question. Again, I'm happy to share the stage with you, and glad you all viewers can join us on this stage. I think our views could not be any more different. I hear you on the rawness in terms of that. I think we understand the problem equally, but our solutions are just a little different. I think if you look at it currently, the one and done system, that's created a lot of problems for both the NBA and NCAA. A lot of players leave after 1 year, and even if they're just projected to be a second round pick, they're leaving school early. And of course, there are some good ones that the system works for, but generally for the majority of these players, what happens is some get drafted and flame out after one contract, or a lot of them don't get drafted at all. And then they go to the G League or out of country league, European league, China league, whatever. Either way, a vast majority of these end up being a short career or no career in the NBA. In addition, when they're coming out so early, you like that they're raw and everything like that. I don't particularly like it. I think being 18 to 20 years old, your body and mind has not matured yet to where you're truly ready for the NBA rigors. Now, there are some players that are ready for it, but that is the exception and not the rule. As you mentioned, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, exception, not the rule. And so that's why you're seeing such a vast majority of them not make it. And this hurts both the NBA and the NCAA, because the NBA, they're getting a larger number of players who are coming into the league who aren't ready. You're getting a lot more Kwame Browns than you're getting Kobe Bryants. And for the NCAA, they're losing their players because they're losing players that haven't truly established themselves before they're mature and everything like that. So they're leaving. So both products are hurting. And my proposal is really to first make the G League stronger, as you did mention this. Thank you for your response, Mr. Mata. And my time is up, but since you took some of my time, I'll take some of mine back as well.
Fair enough.
My proposal is to make the G League stronger. And it's already been done. Each team has already a G League team for themselves, a minor league team. And essentially what I want to do is make the living wage a little bit larger than you said. It was 35. I think 50,000 is the right amount where they can make a living, protect their family and everything like that, take care of themselves while working on their craft. The example of this is the PGA Tour. Their minor league, people come into the tour ready to go, and while they're working on their skills in the minor leagues, they're able to make a living wage that can help themselves and help their family. And the way you do that is just taking a small percentage from the star players. I know that they're the reason why people watch the NBA and watch basketball, but I'm telling you, a small percentage of the money that they're getting paid, and they're getting paid a lot of money, then generally they're going to be able to pay for the funding of the G League players. And I think overall that would help the product of both the NBA and the NCAA, because I also want to change the ruling from a one and done to the baseball, where if you are a high school player and you want to get out, then you can. But if you're going to go to college, you're going to stay for 3 years. And that way you can have enough time to get a college degree and work on your craft. And if you are good enough, then you can leave for the NBA and make some money. I think either way, this is good for the product, for both the NBA and NCAA. And most importantly, it's good for the player. So that's my thoughts. Again, I think we have a similar understanding of the problem, but I don't agree that you should just let all these players come in all raw and ready to go. So that's just my thoughts. I'm interested to get into an open discussion with you on what do you think in terms of the pros and cons of essentially, like you said, you wanted it basically open where after high school they can just jump into the league all whatever. And mine is more of the baseball where it's a little structured where you can come in after high school, but if you're going to go to college, you better stay for 3 years. And it's worked well in the NFL. It's worked well in baseball. So I see no reason why we shouldn't institute that into the NBA. Thank you for your response, Mr. Mata. We will now open it up for discussion between the two of you. Mr. Rama, what is your rebuttal to Mr. Mata's response?
Great points. And you brought up some great points there, Peter. Some of them I agree with, some of them I disagree with. But yes, I think overall in the whole landscape of the NBA draft, which is only 60 players every draft, you get 30 up, 30 down in the second round. Out of those, it's not like you're seeing 20 of those guys come straight out of high school. There's a very small portion of those that are drafted that were available to get drafted out of high school at the time, get drafted out of high school. So we're looking at a very, very small group of players that have that necessarily raw talent for an NBA team to say, okay, I'm going to use my 10th pick on you. I'm going to use my first pick on you in the case of LeBron James. So I think, March Madness, or college basketball, NCAA as a whole, when you look at players staying the 3 years as the proposition that you mentioned, Peter, it's a great proposition. But at the same time, you get a guy that has a breakthrough first year in college, maybe one of the likes that, not necessarily was on an NBA radar going into the year, but he has that magnificent stretch of 1 year. Is he then going to just be forced to stay those next 2 years just due to the fact that, let's say, you have to just stay all 3 years, as you mentioned, Peter? Because that seems a little bit unfair as well. In a sport where basketball is, it really just takes 1 year and teams will look at that resume and say, you know what, that's good enough. And that's why I think in general, it should be open. Everything should be open. I'm not saying teams should just draft, 17-year-olds like every pick they have, but I'm saying that
slippery slope you're going down if you're raised.
Slippery slope. Yeah, but I think, though, if a team wants to draft a player, there shouldn't be any boundaries when it comes to age. I mean, don't draft like a 12-year-old. Like, don't draft Bronny, you know what I mean? And, put him on an NBA team. I'm not saying that, but I will say, though, that I think the 3 year in this basketball setting is tough to do. It's tough to do with the nature of the sport and, just the talent and the gap between the talent. Because you got the cream at the top, and then you do got those gems that you find later in the second round or later in the draft. But, I mean, if you get an opportunity to draft a Zion out of high school or a LaMelo Ball out of high school, I guarantee you teams are going to jump on that. And LaMelo had to go through all these hoops just to wait for his availability when he could have been on an NBA team already developing because of the talent that he already has. So interesting, though. Your points are very, very valid. I'm not discounting any of those points. I just think the 3 year, it can't translate as fluidly as opposed to baseball and football. I
hear you. And I understand those arguments against, say, a Zion Williamson who, his market value is certainly high after just 1 year of college, and it's probably raised from high school to college. But I also point to the argument that if you look at the the old school stars, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, David Robinson, and the list goes on, Charles Barkley, that they stayed at least 3 years. And look, they had a great NBA career following that, because if you also take a look at their injuries, I mean, Zion Williamson's already getting injured in his very first year. I'm a big Pelicans fan. I only got to see him 20 games this year. I mean, if you take a look at those guys' career, I mean, Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley are big guys. They rarely became injured, and I think that's a big problem that we're seeing with these young players coming in, is that their body isn't matured and their mind hasn't matured to handle those injuries and play through it, like the Michael Jordans and such, and Charles Barkley's, like I just mentioned. I do definitely see what your point is in terms of basically open it up willy-nilly. And that's fun. That is fun to see those young players develop in the NBA. But I think the benefits of going to college far outweigh than developing in the G League or any other league. That's just my opinion.
All right. I think the 2 minutes are up for the discussion portion. I know that we've been kind of going on, but definitely the points that you've brought up here, I acknowledge it. I acknowledge it for sure. But it's at the end of the day, and I will stick by this point, it's a risk. It's a risk drafting anybody. 3 years in, 1 year in, 2 year in, 4 year in past cases when it was available, drafting a high school player, tremendous risk to that as well. And I think that makes it all the more intriguing. I know I'm all for, the health of the players, because I think when it's all said and done, the health is wealth. And in order for them to sustain a long career, I mean, it's all fundamentally on whether or not that player can stay healthy. And I do agree with you as far as we've seen the trend, more players that have stayed longer in college tend to already or have a longer career when it comes to less injuries. But I think that's just a testament to their bodies getting more grown. I mean, that's just age question. But if the Lakers want to draft Kobe Bryant, or they didn't draft Kobe Bryant, they traded for him. But in that situation, they took a shot on Kobe Bryant, out of high school. I mean, it can always be what if, but I think that the overall landscape of his career doesn't traject exactly the same. And it's just so fun to watch these high school players just come straight out. I know that's just me. That's just me as a fan talking. Not too much facts backing this. Is just for me, from a fan's perspective, I've enjoyed definitely when I got to see someone fresh out of high school, play against all of these grown men and see how they develop over the years. But yeah, Peter, that's the first question. I appreciate your stances, though, for sure.
Same. We'll agree to disagree on this one.
Yes. And comment section below, please just voice out your opinion. If you agree, disagree with Peter's points, my points, whatever it may be. We want to hear your opinions on this as well. I mean, we're doing this debate not only because I'm interested in what Peter has to say, but I'm also interested in what you guys think as well, because these are such hot topics in the sports world. So, and these are topics that are pretty much going to be ongoing for the next few years unless drastic measures are taken. But yeah, first question, there we go, in the books, NBA and the eligibility.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Rama. Moving on to the second question in the basketball topic. Phil Jackson is widely regarded as one of the greatest coaches of all time, if not the greatest coach of all time, with his 11 championships. Now, some say he's only great because of the players he coached, i.e. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Paul Gasol, and many more. Mr. Mata, starting with you first, where do you stand on this debate? Is Phil Jackson great because of his coaching style, or is it because of the players that he coached? Well, first, without dispute, I can say that Phil Jackson is a great coach. To me, in my book, when you win a championship, you're considered great, hands down. I always hear this about, oh, he's not great. For instance, Tyronn Lue, he's not great because he has LeBron James, so we shouldn't hire him. I think that's a bunch of malarkey, and that I think that if you win a championship, no matter who you are on the team, you deserve some credit. So I think this question really goes back to when you have the best players on your team, can you just simply roll the ball out and they'll still win the championship? And I think that answer is a resounding no. Yes, the best players have all the tangibles and intangibles to play great, But to me, what is so important is to have a sound organizational structure and strategy. And that's what a head coach is there for, is why he's hired. And to me, you can't discount Phil Jackson's ability to manage egos and provide a structure for the best players to flourish, the triangle, for instance. Again, that's one of his assistants' great ideas. Tex Winter, shout out to him. And we've seen great players on the other hand, where we've seen great players, leave or fail to win that championship or flourish at all because of poor management. And that's where the head coach plays a significant role. You really need to be able to get the best out of your team. And to me, it can't be argued that Phil Jackson did just that. Absolutely. Does it help to have Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and Shaq on your team? Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. It helps to have great players, and the credit goes to them as well in terms of winning a championship. But my main point is that Phil Jackson and any coach's contribution are critical for a team's success. Thank you for your response, Mr. Mata. Mr. Rama, what is your rebuttal to Mr. Mata's response?
Okay, so my stance on this, I'll try to not be biased in any form or shape as I answer this. But I will say Phil Jackson is the greatest coach of all time. But however, with how the question is structured, I'll kind of look towards the player/coach perspective and how that's dealt. And with great power comes great responsibility. Phil Jackson, those teams that he won those 11 championships with, there's no denying that the talent was abundant. No denying that. I mean, you look at all across the board, abundant talent. But I still think that there are a few coaches that could have won championships with those rosters. Not 11, but some. So I think that in itself is taking away from Phil Jackson. And just due to the fact that I think, Phil Jackson was coaching, let's say, the Detroit Pistons this year. I mean, they're not making the playoffs. And that's just a testament to talent and the players. The players, at the end of the day, they go on to the court and they play. It takes a great leader to lead great players, but at the same time, a so-so coach can lead great players to a championship as well. I love Phil Jackson to death, and I think he's an amazing coach, phenomenal coach. But do I think that he is replaceable in those 11 championships? Yes, I do think so.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Rama. We'll now go into the Zen Master discussion.
Give me 10 more seconds. The Zen Master is phenomenal. However, I don't think that he is the reason why they won the 11 championships. He's not 50 or more percent. 75% or more is the coach, is the players. I'm sorry.
If you give Alvin Gentry those keys to the car of those teams, do you think he wins 11 championships?
He's not making it out of the parking lot. Alvin Gentry, if you give him the keys, that he's not. But I will say, though, that if you give the keys to at least a coach with some sort of leadership trait, no shot at Alvin Gentry, but, if you give it to someone that knows how to lead, because Phil Jackson, it's a pro and a con, the fact that he was so even keel. Always he was very even keel, and he had to be, to an extent, managing all those egos. But at the same time, it's not like he showed that significant trait that was just above all, this man is the greatest of all time coach. Like, he's not doing those things that are just unheard of, unworldly. He's doing just enough. And in this case, just enough with those talented players was good enough for 11 championships, a testament to the players, a testament to Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Pau Gasol, all those players. At the end of the day, you got to have talent, especially in the NBA, where talent and cream always rises to the top. Very rarely we see a Cinderella story in the NBA. There's so many great
Miami Heat.
Miami Heat. They were favorites, though. They were favorites. They've always been favorites when they had the big three in Miami. And Eric Spoelstra, at the time, he was still a learning coach, but still, at the end of the day, they won a few championships there. But very rarely do we see a coach. And look at Brad Stevens. He's an excellent coach, phenomenal coach. And yet Boston can't even, make it to the finals with that core team. I mean, you got Miami Heat making the finals over Boston.
Yeah, that's what I meant. They're a Cinderella story this year. They didn't win.
That's what. Sorry. Yes, I will recognize that. Miami Heat, excellent. That is a testament again to Eric Spoelstra. I know we're flip-flopping, or I am, but Eric Spoelstra, I think throughout those big 3 years, learned tremendously a lot. But I think in the NBA setting, I think more credit goes to the players as opposed to the coach in the NBA setting. That's why I think Phil Jackson, he's still great. He's amazing. But I still think that without those players, that those 11 championships aren't there for him. And I just see more credit going to those players.
I understand that. I hear that. It is you often hear that it's a players' league. But I think often I always hear with too many fans saying like, the coach doesn't matter. You got, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson. They can just roll the ball out. And I think they're just discounting the ability for a head coach. Steve Kerr was a great head coach. Do I think, though, he could bring the New York Knicks to the NBA championship? Probably not. But I think he could get the best out of his team. And I think that's the most important thing for a head coach. And Phil Jackson did just that. He got obviously he's got the best players, which helps. You need 2-3 superstars to get far in the NBA. But to be able to get the best out of their talent, then that is the key to the game. Now, I think we can bring up a different point in terms of, would you rather a coach like a Brad Stevens or Greg Popovich, who has less talent, but doesn't win as many championships, but gets the most out of his talent, or do you rather Phil Jackson, who manages all those egos and the stars? For me, I always like the Greg Popovich, Brad Stevens, because I come from a smaller team, the New Orleans Pelicans, and for me, success is getting to the playoffs and being a consistent contender while maybe winning a championship once in a while. While you, a Los Angeles Laker fan, wants a championship each year. Y'all get greedy. Y'all go after the best players in free agency and trades. So I think there's also a big difference in terms of market size and everything like that. So I'm interested, do you like the fact that LA and everything like that, and with Phil Jackson too, y'all get the best players, you get the so-called best coach, and instead of having those less talented teams making the playoffs? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts in terms of the difference of our fanhoods.
Yeah, and I think that the fan bias definitely comes into huge play here in the arguments that both me and you are making right now. Laker fans, I mean, I'm not going to lie, we've been spoiled with riches. We've been spoiled with riches when it comes to acquiring talent. Drafting talent, I would say these last few years, it's been hit or miss. You look at how Ingram has progressed now with your team, but outside of that, I mean, it's been really hit or miss with those top draft picks. But I would say when it comes to free agency, I mean, the Lakers organization as a whole has been just notorious, I should say, for pretty much getting the best free agent big man that's available at the time. You look back Shaq, you look back at Kareem, you look back at now getting or AD in the past year. So it is a bit of a spoil with riches mentality. But I still think, though, when it's all said and done, I would take a good roster and an okay coach in basketball than a phenomenal coach with an okay roster in basketball. I think in basketball, if anything, what comes into play from a coaching perspective is leadership. I mean, in any setting, a coach should have a leadership quality. But I think in basketball in specific, as long as you can manage your egos, and a lot easier said than done, I guarantee that. But I think that it's less of an X's and O's perspective when it comes to I have good talent, rather than a X and O's perspective when you don't have good talent and you're trying to make it work with all of those technique-driven approaches. But with Phil, he just had to make sure that the egos were in line. And in many cases, they weren't, with Shaq and Kobe, with, I'm sure that you've watched The Last Dance, and I'm sure everyone else watches The Last Dance, and seeing how difficult it is to manage egos. I still think, regardless of everything, the talent will rise to the top. And more often than not, the best team in the NBA usually wins. You can disagree with me, and I'm sure you will, but I think that history has shown that in NBA, usually the team with the best roster wins.
This much is true. I can't say, I have to say that we can't discount coaches' contributions. Like I just said in my main point, and Phil Jackson is great. But I'll end this segment with a quick question, and I'll answer it myself here. Do you think Phil Jackson is the greatest coach of all time? I don't think so. I think it's Greg Popovich.
In the basketball setting, Peter, or is this
in the basketball setting?
Okay, in the basketball setting. I think Krzyzewski. Duke. I got to go Duke. And we touched base on college, but I just think that what he's done for the period of time that he's been there, I just admire him. I've watched a few videos of him and the Duke documentaries. And he coaches the U.S. Basketball team. I think now Greg Popovich just took over the U.S. basketball team. But I think overall, Krzyzewski and Duke, he is I can't discount my other guy, Mr. John Wooden, too, but that's kind of before our time. We didn't really get to experience that firsthand. It's just more so of the stories that have been passed down and his impact and legacy that we hear. But I think that we can't not mention him. But I think if you're giving me a roster of random players and I just got to pick a coach. Yeah, average Joes, you know what I'm saying? Average Joes, and I get to my first selection for who's going to coach him. I'm actually going Krzyzewski with this one. And I think Greg Popovich is 1B to Krzyzewski's 1A. It's right there. It's right there.
Thank you for your responses on that topic. We're going to move now to the football portion of the debate. Starting first with this question. This season, the NFL has expanded the playoff to add one more wildcard team and has changed to only allow the number one seed to have a bye week. There are also no preseason games this season, albeit mostly because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but that is discussed and has been discussed in recent years about the amount of preseason games. In addition, there have also been talks over the past few years about expanding the regular season game. Currently, it's 16. There's been talks that it probably might move to 17 next year. 18 games have also been discussed. So, Mr. Marama, beginning with you this time, what are your thoughts on the recent changes and discussions about the preseason, the regular season, as well as the postseason? Would you change the current format? How and why?
I will say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I didn't think anything was broke with the NFL format when it comes to the playoffs in years past. And they did modify it this year with, like you mentioned, one team only getting a bye per conference. I don't like it. I really don't like it. I think there's 16 teams in each conference. And you're only going to award one team, the very top of the mountain team, a bye, just one bye too. I don't like it. I really enjoyed the old playoff format, the two teams getting the bye in each conference, according to record, and the other four teams making it in and playing on wildcard round. I will modify this, though. So I would go back to, the 6 teams only per conference. However, if a team does not, or I should say, if a team wins their division and they have less than a 500 record, as you may very well see in the NFC East this year, they should not be awarded a home playoff game. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Yeah, I really don't want to hear it when it comes to they deserve a home playoff game for winning a division filled with high school JV teams. I don't want to hear it. And it's really, really disgraceful to have a team that's 7-9 or God forbid 6-10 hosting a playoff game. I mean, that's atrocious. And you're going to have a team maybe perhaps coming out of the NFC West this year, in the Arizona Cardinals or LA Rams, who are going to be a wild card team, and they're going to finish with an 11-5 record, which is a phenomenal record in the NFL landscape. 11-5, I know 95% of all NFL fans would take their team having an 11-5 record, and you're going to have to go somewhere. And although you're going to a team that's 6-10, it still doesn't matter. I will finish with this. Still, I don't like the 7 teams and the 1 bye, but I will say, how would I modify it? The top 2 teams get the bye still. However, like I mentioned, if a team falls below 500, they do not deserve a home playoff game. If they finish 8-8, so be it, fine. Send them to Philly, send them to Jerry World, whatever, fine. But if they finish 7-9, that's disgraceful record. You should not be hosting a playoff game.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Rama. Mr. Mato, we'll move to you on your response to this question. Solid answer, Mr. Rama. And yes, I do agree with a couple of parts of it. There's other parts I kind of disagree with. I think I'll start with the disagree. We don't know. We don't know how everything's going to shake out this year. It might be exactly what we want as a fan. I will say, oftentimes when you just mentioned 11-5, there's some divisions that are really amazing, and some teams don't make it at 10-6 or 11-5. And I feel this format does make that just in terms of I always feel like there's always one team that maybe missed out on the playoffs that probably deserves a chance to at least get a trip there. I mean, before it was 12 teams, now it's 14. So it's still just a little under half the teams. The NBA is more than half the teams. So I think we'll give it a chance. But I too do like the previous setting at least more. But again, we don't have enough information in terms of to make a call just yet about the playoff format now. I think, like you said, if you're below 500, you don't deserve to have a home playoff advantage at all. I mean, as a Saints fan, seeing them lose to the Seahawks a decade ago was a disgrace. Of course, they had a chance to beat them, but it's a disgrace that they get a chance to host a home playoff game. In terms of the format, I think they should stick with the 16-game regular season. I think that's been solid. It keeps the regular season exciting while also, providing good enough games to make up if you do struggle or whatever, anything like that. I do think it's interesting that the preseason, I know it's because of COVID, that the play has actually been pretty good. I think teams have been fresh. I know we speculated before that maybe injuries would come into play, but I don't think it's come into play more so than any other season. I will say that I think they should limit to preseason games to 3 once they. Thank you, Mr. Mata. We'll now go into the open discussion. I'll wrap up real quick, but once they get back to having preseason games again, I think having a limit to 3 would be good. And I think they did make a right choice in adding a playoff team. I don't think they should add a regular season. I think if they're going to add games, then playoffs is the most exciting and the most just in terms of adding games. So I do like this current format. I like both, but I think giving this format a chance, I think I like it.
Good takes. Very good takes.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring up some valid points. And adding a playoff team, of course, adding a playoff team, it should never really be a bad thing, especially in the NFL setting where it has been very, very tight in those wild card races at the end of the year, week 15, 16, 17, and just, one spot available. It would be nice to have another spot, and as they did. What I would like to add too, just kind of off the points that we've made, but I think that adding another bye in the regular season is actually not a bad idea. And I actually would add another bye. I mean, there's so many times where you see teams, and especially under, the circumstances of this year with COVID and kind of the buys having to be so flexible,
Right.
It's somewhat unfair for a team to have a bye in week 5, and then they have to really play that stretch, that second half stretch with really no flexibility whatsoever in those buys. And that's when you see the injuries pile up and anything. I don't think that the NFL is any rush to either finish in February or start in early August. I really don't see it. So if we can take away one preseason game and just implement another bye week somewhere in the mix, I think it's going to benefit all the teams in the long term. I think that, teams would be all for it. No one's going to not have, no one's going to say no to another bye. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not like we're in any rush to finish in that first week of February. Like, we're in no rush. And so I think from the health standpoint of the players and just from a scheduling standpoint, adding another bye, it wouldn't be a bad idea. It really wouldn't be. I know it's more of a playoff driven discussion that we're having, but I think I'd like to add that. And when it comes to the playoffs, as you mentioned, I think that, what is really unfortunate though about this new system is just that single team getting a bye in each conference. Just one getting that first round bye. That seems a little bit unfair. If you look at maybe a team that goes 14-2 and that second place team going 13-3, I think 13-3 in an NFL setting is more than enough to at least merit and earn a bye week is in the first week of the playoffs. That's just all I say. I mean, we could negotiate, me and you, Peter, and discuss the fact that, yes, adding another team, 7 teams, but then obviously we're going to get a little murky in the waters because how is that going to work if 2 teams have a bye and 7 teams? So that part, I haven't really spent too much thought. But when I heard about the new format, I'm just like, 1 bye is not enough for each conference.
I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it is. I think if you win the conference, so to speak, because of your record, then you deserve a bye. I think to me, it waters it down when you give the second best team a bye as well. Now, I will say I do like your idea if we're going to do my proposal of 3 preseason games and then adding a bye throughout the regular season. I think, and then also on top of that, having only the best team getting a bye in the playoffs where the current format is right now, I think that would work. That's just my opinion. Like I said, I think just having the number 2 team get a bye just waters it down for me. I mean, back in 2006, the Saints got a bye as the number 2 seed, and they were 10-6. So sometimes you're not always going to get those 14-2s, like you're saying. And those 14-2s, like last year, or 13-3s last year, like Green Bay, it was a bit of a hollow 13-3. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, very, very hollow. And that's a good point you brought up last year in specific. Hate to bring it up because it is a touchy subject with us Saints fans, as we were also close to getting that, bye, and who knows what would happen if we would have gotten that bye. But yeah, I think that the points you brought up are fair, and I acknowledge them. I agree with most, actually, the points you brought up. And I think that in this round in specific, we can kind of agree on most, disagree on some, which is healthy. But but yeah, NFL, I mean, it's such a tricky regular season just due to the fact, I mean, every game is magnified. But then if you look at the divisional setup, that's, again, where I find most of my concern from. And time in and time out, we always do have that one division, whether it is, notably the NFC East, as it's been, or past years, it's been the AFC East, or AFC South, sorry, I should say, where teams are finishing, 8-8, 9-7. Whoever gets to 9 wins first wins. And in the rare case, as you mentioned earlier, to our Saints' expense, the Seattle Seahawks of a decade ago. I mean, hosting a playoff game, that's just
disgraceful,
unacceptable, disgraceful,
nasty.
Yeah, we'll see, and we'll see, because I know that, as you mentioned, we'll see how this year unfolds, and we'll really take it in as a unbiased NFL fan, and we'll take it in as a Saints fan, as we always do. But
at the end of the day, the NFL has a great product, and no matter way that you shake it, and they can be flexible on this a little bit.
Yeah, and they can be. So we'll see. But yeah, I think overall the point, I mean, bye week, maybe 1 in the first 8 or 1 in the first 9, and then giving a bye week somewhere in the back half, just spreading out the season a little bit more to hopefully limit the injuries or allow players to come back from those injuries. It's a key thing, because NFL, as we've seen this year too, injuries, I mean, decimating teams.
Indeed,
so,
especially my fantasy football team.
Oh my goodness, that's another topic. Yeah, but yes, good, very good discussion, open discussion and debate on this very heavily talked about subject in the NFL playoffs and the NFL schedule as a whole.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for your answers on those topics. Let's move on to college football. Since 2014, college football has been using a 4-team playoff to determine the champion. Those teams included in the playoffs are selected by a playoff committee. What are your thoughts on the current college football playoff format? Would you change it at all? How and why? Mr. Mata, we'll hear your response first this time.
So the current format, I think it's an improvement from the BCS. I think there was some injustice in the BCS for some teams, specifically back in 2011. Again, bringing up some of our teams, LSU faced Alabama. I felt like Oklahoma State should have been in there. I think a playoff would have been a good time to be used during that specific year. And there's been other cases where a team is kind of left out, and they're like, "Man, I just want to play it on the field." So I think the playoff, the 4-team playoff, is an improvement, but I think we can't deny the fact that some of the semifinal games have been lopsided, which is concerning, and it points out a disparity of talent between really the top 5 teams in college football, between them and the rest of college football. But anyways, back to the point. I actually had written an essay about this back in high school, and I said 32 teams, and I think I was a little young and reckless. That's a little too radical, especially after seeing the results I just mentioned.
TBH.
Yeah, that was a TBH from way back when, so we'll just leave that in the past. I do think, though, we'll say this, the College Football Committee is too subjective, and they, just like the BCS, have their biases. And what I would like to see is a restructure of the NCAA conference in general, and conferences and divisions in general, that seeks to eliminate these committees and the biases. Something like 5 major conferences where they're divided into 2 divisions. The way I would see is kind of like the old NFL structure that we just talked about, where essentially that the winner of the division takes a spot in the playoffs. So it's like a 12-man playoff, and essentially you have 10 divisions. If you win the division, you get in, and then 2 wild card would be if you come in second for a designated division that is, contested. Like,
thank you for your response, Mr. Mata.
I'll wrap up. The SEC West is a contested division where LSU, Alabama might get in or not each year. I think if you designate them as a strong division, so where this number 2 team in that division gets in, then I think it'll create a nice playoff structure. I think this, at the end of the day, would limit committees and bias and allow for the best teams to play it on the field. So again, I'll say it, change the format to 5 conferences divided by 2 divisions. And the winner of the division gets in, along with 2 divisions being designated strong divisions, and the second place a finisher in those strong divisions get in as well.
Mr. Rama, what is your rebuttal to Mr. Mata's response?
Interesting takes. Very interesting takes.
Chew on it.
Yes, let's go. I will say this. You're right. The college football playoff was an improvement from the BCS. That we cannot discount. And I will say this. The college football playoff is perfect right now. It's great. It's fine. I would not change any part of it. Any part. Yes, that's a hot take. That's a TBH. I think what we've seen out of the college football playoff is exactly what all college football fans want. Unbiased, not looking at your team as specific and saying, oh, we should have gone in this year, we should have gone in that year. I think I love it because the college football playoff doesn't start, when those New Year Eve games play, or New Year's Day, or whenever they play that semifinal game. They don't start then. They start week 1 of the college football season. Every game has so much importance to the overall trajectory of your team going. I mean, we can speak fondly of it from our team, LSU, last year. Every game, I mean, as much of, yes, we were all shooting for that college football playoff spot, but we knew every game, every Saturday was a game that had implication on it, whether we won and how we won. And I think college football, yes, I do agree with you and how you stated that the committee sometimes can be biased. However, I can't name you a team that has, won the college football playoff that we've said they were not the best team that year. We look back since the inception of this, and, Ohio State, they were the first team to win it back in 2014 against Oregon. But since then, it's kind of been, the same old story. It's the Clemson, it's the Alabama, it's the Oklahoma. But even then, Oklahoma's getting in, but they're getting whooped in the first semifinal game. Ohio State has come in and shown something, but it really has been cream of the crop rising to the top. if we introduce more teams or we get this a little bit messy, it is going to become messy. And I think right now, as we stand, we can't discount that the best team that wins the championship in the last, since this started, the college football playoff, there's no debate that they've been the best college football team that year. I will finish my point with that. LSU, we've made it only once, but as anybody can agree with, we were the best team in all of the land last year.
We will now open it up for discussion between the two of you. Mr. Mata, you'll have the first to rebuttal to Mr. Rama's response on this topic.
I hear you. I hear that the best team wins it. I think my point is that I want more teams just to have the opportunity to get in. So essentially, the top 12 teams get in my scenario. I hear you, and I even made the point about how the semifinal games have been kind of an embarrassment for those teams that lose. But I just think giving it more opportunities for those teams will limit. And my biggest thing is that the bias in the playoff committee, I want to eliminate that as much as possible. I think it's just unfair for Ohio State or Alabama or whoever, just because they have a bigger name brand, are going to get in over a number 5 team like Oklahoma State again. Maybe not as big as brand, pretty good big school, but not as big as Alabama or Ohio State. Just because they don't have a bigger brand, the bias is kind of in favor of those bigger schools, and I just want to eliminate that as much as possible. So I know maybe it would make things messy, and also my thing, I would also just eliminate all the conference championship games. I think those don't need to be happening. If you win your division, you get a playoff spot. It gives a chance for you to actually win the championship if you're a top 12 team, and you can prove it on the field. There's no bias telling you you're not supposed to be there or not. So that's just my thing.
Interesting. Very interesting, Peter, and it's well thought out, calculated. The only concern, or the biggest concern I think I have, is just that it takes away from the week by week impact that those games have. These big marquee matchups. I'm not going to talk this year because obviously this year is a lot different. But in years past, you look at games like the LSU Alabama game, for instance, last year. I mean, in Tuscaloosa, just the amount of implication that game had alone on the playoff. If you allow more teams, it takes a little bit away from the stakes that are in that game.
In the regular season.
In the regular season, exactly. And that's something that, for me, and this is my opinion, college football, what I've loved so much and how I fell in love with it is just the amount of impact each game has on if you can really have a shot at that national championship game. A little bit different than, college basketball, where it is a lot different. It's just a matter of who gets hot at the right time. You can string together a couple wins here and there, make the tournament. But if, you catch hotness as, a couple years ago, like Loyola Chicago, they came out of literally the depths of the abyss just to make a Final Four run, which was amazing. That's a sport that we can really back, as opposed to college football, where really at the end of the day, the cream will rise. The cream will rise. And we look at these, I'm bringing Vegas into the equation, but even these semifinal games, when it's Alabama versus Oklahoma, they're like double-digit favorites over these teams. And if we bring in more teams, it's just going to be more or less the blowout. Yes, occasionally we'll see that surprise upset, as we do in college football from time to time. But I think that it'll just take away from the regular season and just how big some of those marquee regular season matchups are. But yeah, college football, it's a sport me and you are so passionate about. Mm-hmm. And we love to see change regardless, and we love to see how things play out. So if your proposition were ever to come to fruition, I would still back it, because I'm at the end of the day, I'm a college football fan, and we just love to watch college football.
Right.
That is, there's pros and cons for sure. Pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I still like like I said, the BCS and 4-game playoff, 14 playoff. I still like it. I'm a college football fan like you. I just think, I hear you on you saying that the regular season might not matter as much, but it's kind of more concentrating it towards the end of the year, as you would in any other sport, in college basketball or in the NFL. And I just like in the NFL, past years with the format it has, regular season was pretty crucial. Maybe not each game mattering as much like it does in college football, but it still matters. You can't just rack up 4 or 5 losses and it'll be okay. I just think bringing more teams to the table and having them chance. I know they're probably going to get whooped, like we see, but just giving them the chance to see themselves get whooped, I guess, is my point. I don't want any bias. I don't want any complaining or committee saying that they don't belong there. Prove it on the field. If you belong, then you'll belong. And I think overall the product would increase because more players would go. More big name players won't concentrate themselves to those big name schools when they see, okay, at least I'm getting a chance to play against Alabama in the playoffs. So maybe I'll go to a Washington or something like that. That's just my point. I think, again, a great product the college football is, and either way, I'll still watch it just like you will.
Hypothetical speaking, Peter, I'm just saying, let's say they do expand that playoff. I mean, imagine this. And we all know, Alabama, Auburn, Iron Bowl, it's last game of the season for both of those teams in conference play. What if Alabama's sitting there pretty at undefeated and Auburn's, couple losses, Alabama sits all of their stars because they know even with a loss, I'll still be in. Mm-hmm. That's the part that gets a little bit tricky. The tanking, we see it with the NBA, obviously different context there, but that's something I don't think that would ever happen because Nick Saban or these coaches, they're never the type to just, tank, if you will. But that's the sketchy part that I'm a little bit scared of. And
I think the incentives would be like we did in the NFL previously with the home field advantage. I mean, it's pretty big if Alabama gets to host a playoff game, against whoever. You always want to play at home. So I think that could be worked, but I hear you on that in terms of tanking or anything that.
Can you imagine Alabama at home in Tuscaloosa against Boise State? I mean, it would be fun to just say, what if, Boise State pulls off that upset, just given the opportunity. So I will say that in regards to your points, Peter, as much as we are huge college football enthusiasts, we'd love to see those, the UCFs of a couple years ago, just have a shot and see what they can do. I mean, if it's a blowout, it's a blowout, but at least maybe just 1 year, just see how it goes. But yeah, to your point, we love college football.
Yes, indeed.
Again, glad to hear y'all's answers on that. We'll now segue into the wildcard questions. Sticking with college, let's be straightforward with this next question. Mr. Mata, starting with you first, should college athletes be paid?
So I understand the arguments and the frustrations of players wanting to get paid, but we also have to look at the other side of the argument and the benefits that most athletes get in college. For one, obviously, they get college paid for. They get a scholarship. Now, not all athletes get full rides, but they still get a good portion of their education paid for, along with stipends for living expenses, which is huge in terms of keeping their current costs down, while also increasing their possible revenue, later down the road, in terms of trying to receive a degree or, making it as a pro in their respective sports, which I think is huge. I'm a big proponent trying to get a college degree, especially if you're getting a free education. Another huge benefit that can't be discounted is college athletes get free advertisement. If you put in the work for your respective sport, you'll get publicity free to you. The school will do it, the media will do it for you, and overall, that's an amazing experience and a confidence-building experience for a person. If you're into that fame and attention, you can get it with your play. And again, trust me, all that free advertisement opens up a lot of doors, no matter if you turn pro or not. It's huge for your possible revenue down the line, no matter if you're a pro or not. Now, sure, I understand the argument that athletes don't get their paid for their likeness, and the NCAA makes a lot off of them. But there are plenty of benefits that you get every day as a college student that other college students don't get. I do think, though, that the NCAA does really go far in terms of their rules. They're a little stringent. Like, for instance, I heard a USC YouTuber who was a kicker for the USC football team couldn't get paid for his YouTube channel because he was a college athlete, and he had to choose between that. So I think relaxing those rules a little bit, I'll wrap up real quick, relaxing those rules, which I think they are doing, is fine. Relaxing those rules, though, to the point where the colleges or the NCAA isn't paying the players, but it's a third party, and a third party in the open market. So if you can get a sponsor or something like that, endorsement outside of college football, outside of the college and the NCAA wanting to do that for you, then you should be able to make money off of that, which I think they're already kind of doing and putting in place. So if they want to get paid, then I think that's the best pathway for it. I don't think every college player should get paid or anything like that directly from the college or from the NCAA.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Mata. Mr. Rama, what is your rebuttal to Mr. Mata's response?
Peter, you just went on there 2 minutes and you brought up some strong points. I'll give you that. And about 75% through your portion of your point, I was like, oh, I don't know. But then that last 25% brought it back. And I will say this, I agree with that last 25% that you said, that back half or the back 25% of your debate. I think that it should not be the colleges per se that are literally going out of their pocketbook and giving them, a check. I don't know how you base it off or how you distribute it evenly or not evenly, but I don't want that happening. The colleges are already providing, like you said, free education, food, everything, housing, all of that stuff is kind of built in that. As at the same time, you're getting your brand exposure. I think though, if you're able to market yourself or a company wants to, come up to you and can you be sponsored in that setting, I have no problem with the player getting paid in that aspect at all, point blank, period. And in the college likeness or the player likeness, I should say, I mean, I definitely for sure miss playing those NCAA video games for sure, but that's beyond the point. But I still think though, if a player can market himself and put himself in a position to have those companies, ask them, can you sponsor our product? All for it. It will get murky though when you have those universities paying out of their pocket for those players in like an NFL setting. You know what I mean? Contracts being that will get messy, or bribery and all of that stuff. That's why I said, colleges can position themselves with their brand, saying, oh, this is LSU or this is Alabama. Look at our historic or all the players that have gone through this system and look at that and use that and then say, brands will approach you already. If your play on the field is superb, then I'm all for that. But it will get messy if Alabama has, let's say this much cap space, if you will, to use on 5-star recruits. Because we all know, a 5-star is going to take wherever the money is going to go, especially at that age. The counter that I have with myself and with you is just the fact that, yes, I do agree, though, that if college players as a whole are getting paid for that, they will get a chance to learn how to manage their money a little bit better, as we've seen some of those players go on to the next level or even go on to their careers, and they don't really necessarily have those tools available as far as managing money. But I think that overall, though, that does not overtake the whole, college players should be paid. I still think, though, that if your market value and your brand allows you to get a check from a company that's willing to give you a check, then all for it. There's no need to wait on a Nike deal or a Adidas deal the moment you're done with your collegiate career. It should be at the moment. If Nike's willing to throw themselves at you, then that's fine. I'm all for it.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Rama. We'll now go into the open discussion between the two of you on this topic. Mr. Mata, you'll have the first to rebuttal to Mr. Rama's response on this topic.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, and we're on the same page on this one in terms of the third party coming in and not the NCAA or colleges paying these players. I think, if you're in the open market and there's a demand for you, by all means. I don't think you should, like I was mentioning, the USC kicker shouldn't have to give up his YouTube channel just because he's making money off his likeness or his personality on YouTube. He had to give up his possibly it was a choice between giving up his scholarship or giving up his YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's right. I know someone very similar to that, Peter. Destroying on YouTube. And for all you YouTubers, you may have seen some of his videos. His name is Destroying. But he was a kicker, and he went somewhere in Florida. I think it was UCF at the time. And at the same time, he was making YouTube videos,
Mhm.
and he got enough subscribers to have his videos monetized. And then that's when they kind of gave him that ultimatum, like, you know, it's either you're going to continue this YouTube, or, you know, you can't be on our team anymore. You
Right.
can't take part in classes. You know, scholarship is pretty much going to be withheld from him.
Mhm.
And that's the part where it's so unfair. This man's making a YouTube career off of things that he's doing. And you know, you're at a college that allowed this man to come here and have his brand built. But how can you have his brand built when you're having so many boundaries and hurdles
Right.
disallowing that? It really doesn't make much sense from the NCAA perspective.
Right, especially if he's doing, I guess, off company time, so to speak. And that, I mean, that's exactly if a player. I think also there's some rules before where players couldn't get a part-time job. You know, I would be making more as an accounting intern than some of these college football players because they couldn't get a job because they have to give up their scholarship, which is, I think, is kind of ridiculous. If you're going to do it outside company time, so to speak, outside your college football time or college whatever sport time, then you should be able to make some money off of it. I mean, I think that's pretty reasonable. If you're willing to put in the work and you've got a demand for your services or anything like that, then more to it. I do think we have to essentially flesh this out if things start getting paid in terms of that. You mentioned, I think, before about recruitment or something like that, about how the bigger schools, and we all know that, you know, they're paying under the rug money to these players so they can come. How do we have oversight of that if, you know, these players are getting paid on the side? I guess I think there's my argument, I guess, is just a little unclear. But how do you handle that? Essentially, if these players are getting paid from the side, do you just allow colleges to keep, you know, doing these shady deals, or do you let them do it up in front, or do you just? I don't know. I think that just opens up some things, and I'm just saying to be careful of the slippery slope, and then also, you know, I guess slippery slope of it dipping down to high school players and grade school players are getting paid for their services. But again, you know, if it's from a third party and not from a school or organization like the NCAA, then I think it's fine.
Yes. I mean, in this argument, I think it's pretty clear where we both stand on it, and we're pretty firm on that. It's going to get so messy. It will get so messy. But even if in the propositions that we're bringing up, that too will get messy. You know what I mean? Because you're going to have schools trying to oftentimes pay these companies to pay these players. You know,
right? Like Stanford could be like, you know, we have Google nearby. You can get sponsored by Google. They have all these things you can go for on their campus and whatever, and do their joyride over there. That's a big benefit. I mean, do you regulate that, or do you just let it go willy-nilly, free market? I don't know.
Tough. That's tough.
That's a different
really
question for another day, I suppose.
That's right.
If we get to that point, if we have a problem with, I guess, I mean, again, these are rules.
Yeah, but I think the first step is addressing the current problem at hand and how we feel about that. And right now, it's just not right. I think that it's a little bit too strict. But like we said, I don't think that, you know, there should be a salary cap per se for each college, for them to kind of divide that up with, you know, who they feel is worthy. But that's a good topic, a very hot topic, and it has been an ongoing hot topic. I know far before, you know, we've even been fans of the sport. It's long. I mean, this is an ongoing topic, and it will be ongoing, I think, for the next.
Absolutely. I think just so polarizing.
Yeah, for sure.
Some people get so polarized about it. They go one side or the other. I think there's a nice happy medium that we could find.
Yes. And that's how we work towards it. I think that it's not going to just, you know, happen overnight, and all these NCAA loose ends are going to just be tied. It will take a long process, but I think, like you said, it just starts somewhere, and NCAA seems to be so firm on their side, and they have been for the longest time. That's why they got to make that breakthrough.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you for all of these answers so far to these debates. It's been great. Moving now to our final question of the debate. In the past 10 years, Analytics have entered the realm of sports and have changed the way teams and players operate. Mr. Mata, since you have a master's in analytics, we'll go to you first on this. Do you believe advanced analytics in sports, or do you lean more towards a traditional approach?
So very good question, especially for me, who I guess people would consider me in the analytics corner since I have a master's in analytics. And look, I definitely think there's a demand for analytics and there's a place for it in sports. But where I think it goes awry is when people begin using data and analytics as the end-all, be-all. I guess that might be surprising to everyone. Again, I'm an master analytics guy. I don't consider it to be the end-all, be-all. At the end of the day, the analysis you do is only as good as the data that you have in the context in which you are in. For instance, if you have inaccurate data or data that is comparing apples to oranges, then it's hard to legitimize your analysis. And also, too, that the context part of it. Just because the stats and analysis is telling you one thing doesn't mean at the drop of a hat you should just change everything that you do. So example of that would be just because the analytics are saying you have a good 3-point percentage, you should just stop shooting mid-range jumpers, even though that's a big part of your game. I think that's a big mistake, because one of the big reasons why you probably have a good percentage of shooting is because you shoot those mid-range jumpers. You get that rhythm in your game. And yeah, that's just one example. But what I'm trying to make a point is analytics is just one piece of the information that helps you make a decision. Ultimately, you still have to make that decision one way or another. And it certainly helps to have analytics, but it's just one part of the information. On the other side, the traditional approach usually goes off experience and instincts and things like that, which I think is something that can't be discounted. It's a talent to be able to read the tempo of the game. It's a talent to read the mark of a player, the intangibles, etc. And in my opinion, that too is crucial information for making a decision. So in essence,
thank you for your response,
I'm about
Mr.
to wrap
Mata.
up here. In essence, what I'm saying that there is a need for both. I believe you should trust both pieces of information, traditional and analytics, and ultimately use your instincts to make the call. Then as you do, you live and you learn from the decisions you make. But at the end of the day, I'm telling you, if you do the process of analyzing both pieces of information and using your instincts to make the call, you'll find success more times than not.
Mr. Rama, what is your rebuttal to Mr. Mata's response?
Good takes, Peter. And coming from your background, I'm glad that you took that first part of that section and I was able to digest some of your points and apply it to my points. I will say this, though. You had pretty much analytics 50-50 split with instinct. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
So a lot of the points you just brought up, I agree with. I mean, how can I not? You're a master's degree of analytics. However, I will say, though, I think that it's more so 25% analytics, 75% instinct. Analytics in sports, I mean, we've seen it in the last 10 years. I mean, it's just drilled into pretty much everyone's brain now, the reasons why certain things are done on the court or on the field. But I don't think, and you brought this up, it should not be the end all be all. It should not be that last or the first thing that you're making your decision on, or you're following your decision based on that. I think when it comes down to it, given any setting, I will stand by this, given any setting, feel, instinct, and your ability to, and as you said, I mean, it's a tremendous trait to have that feel and instinct to make those right calls, but don't base it on the foundation of analytics. Base it on the foundation of how those players are playing on that specific day. Because those analytics, they're brought up over an array of games, seasons long of games. And so I think that when we fall in love with analytics too much, sometimes that can be at our expense of that game, especially when it's a high matchup game. I mean, I'm sure that we've all kind of discussed and heard about the Tampa Bay manager, Cash, pulling Snell in that game based on his analytics decision on pulling him on the when the pitcher gets to that third round facing batters, even though Snell has shown throughout that game and
Thank you for your response,
I'll
Mr.
wrap
Rama.
up. That game and, in that series, he's been dominant. But just based off analytics, he decided to pull him. I don't think that that's right. Bob Costas, I heard it in a recent interview. He stated, and I can't agree more, at the end of the day, analytics and sports, I mean, you look at who's playing the sport. The machine is not playing the sport. The data is not playing the sport. At the end of the day, the heartbeat, humans have heartbeat. They're the ones out there. And Blake Snell in that game was cruising. He was dealing better than most have ever seen any pitcher. But just based on analytics, you're going to pull him. That's suspect. You got to look at each game in its entirety and feel an instinct. I will say this, though, not discounting analytics in any shape or form. I just don't think that coaches and how the sport has taken it should be to that extent. It's gone far past, I think, what's needed for the game of, whatever sport you're playing.
Right. And it's even in other industries too, not even just sports. It's just buzzwords. People see fancy graphs and everything like that. And look, I love it. I'm in analytics. I do love it. And it has some value. I just think it's just there for making a decision. I think you pretty much were saying the same thing. It's there to help you make a decision. I think, if it's the end all be all, we've seen it already kind of fail, not necessarily fail. It succeeded, but it didn't give you a championship. Billy Beane, obviously Moneyball, everyone always brings that up. Daryl Morey in the NBA, he just got fired. They didn't get a championship, but they did have success, but they didn't get a championship. At the end of the day, it takes a little heart and instinct and feel and, knowing the game, the context of the game to win a championship. And again, this is going back to, again, even expanding in sports, in business or anything that you do. Yes, you trust the data, but you also question the data. Well, where is it coming from? Why should we believe it if it's coming from that source? You ask a bunch of questions, you get context behind it so that you can start trusting that data and everything like that. So that's not, again, biases come in and everything like that. So I
fair.
think, I think it just can't be
fair.
all.
Yeah, that's very, because we look at those numbers and how they're comprised, right? And they're averages, right? And when we've learned in sports, though, there's so much discrepancy between that. Those averages are set because there are days where players are far, far superior than those averages suggest. Mm-hmm. And there are also days that, players are far worse than those averages suggest. So I think that that's where feel has to come in and trust and instinct with your players. As a coach, and we've discussed coaching a lot in this debate, and I think it's so vital because coaching, at the end of the day, like, for instance, Kevin Cash, the Tampa Bay manager, he's getting tremendous hate towards, his decision. But at the end of the day, you have to feel it out. You have to feel. You can't just close your eyes and just say, this is what the analytics is telling me to do. You have to see what's visually going on the field on that specific day. Because both you and me, we've played sports our entire lives. And we know that there's days where, we're just struggling and it's just not our day. And there are days where, we can't miss a shot or you can't miss a putt. It's just like you have those days and those feels. And it takes a great coach also to acknowledge that. And that's why I think that analytics are getting driven too much into the brains of not only the coaches, but also the players to where that's affecting their game and, how they're playing. And it kind of takes away from their style of play. And dependent on how driven those teams are with the analytics, it's like, it's taking away from the organic feel of a game.
Right. And that's an interesting point you make about the Tampa Bay and his decision to sit. That was actually a hypothetical in our master's program. And I said, for me, you would go with your ace, and if he's hot, you go with your ace. You need to win the game. You play to win the game. The analytics will tell you probably no, he needs his rest or anything like that. But you need to put your ace out there. If you feel like he's healthy enough and he says he's healthy enough, then you go with him. And there's so many decisions like that you make that you have to make on an instinct basis. And, analytics can only tell you so much about that. It's good. Gives you good, quick information, which is good. And it automizes things. But, again, the decision, it has to come from instinct and feel.
Yeah. And I've talked a lot down on analytics in this debate or in this discussion, but I will say though, in some instances, I can see it incredibly valuable as a tool to see, you know, especially I know we brought up high moments in a game, you know, whether it's the 9th inning, 8th inning, 7th inning, whether or not you're doing that, or let's say if we bring into the football context, like a 4th and 1, right? And you're in that, you know, 38-yard line and you're kind of in that no man's land. Do you go for it or do you punt? And then you look at the analytics and see if you make that first down, your win probability increases tremendously. I think it's valuable to look at it in that aspect and just use it to make your decision, but don't allow that percentage to dictate your entire decision. You still have to fall back on your feel and instinct and how the game has played up to that point, because it's not cookie cutter. It's not cookie cutter because every game unfolds organically in its own way. There's never two games that are exactly mirror images of each other. So that's why I think analytics should always be taken into account, but don't let it take over and that's the only thing you're seeing. You know, that's I think the point that I'm trying to get across.
Right, absolutely. Leverage all the technology and data that we have, but again, you know, you're a human, you see the process, you see what's going on. You should know, if you're in a position, you should know how you're feeling or how the team is feeling. So make that decision based off the analytics and your instincts.
Oh man, these have been some very, very good discussions.
Yes, indeed.
And debate. I will say debate, just because we have, you know, typically, you know, when we're podcasting and having our previous podcast, we love to kind of bounce back on ideas more so of the time we're agreeing or we're piggybacking on one another. But I think it's good, and it's also healthy, the fact that we share some disagreements, especially because in the world of sports, there are some very polarizing topics, as we just discussed. And I'm happy to share the stage with you, Peter. And it was a very fun, you know, hour and some change debating these hot topics that I know me and you, we've always wanted to really let loose and discuss these topics in the forefront. And also with, again, I'd shout out our viewers too. Thank you for sticking with us and watching this debate. Absolutely.
Yeah, viewers, again, thank you for continuing to subscribe and view. This has been fun with Ryan and myself, as always. Always love doing these podcasts and everything like that, spending time with my Anak.
It's been a pleasure. Please like, comment, you know, give us some feedback. We love feedback. As Peter said, he listens to everyone. Mm-hmm. He listens to everyone. He takes in the feedback. Likewise with me, take in the feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. If there's a point that we made that was just on the mark, you know, let us know. If there's a point that we maybe missed the mark, or you agree with Peter or you agree with me on one of the takes, we'd love to hear it in the comment section below. But again, we hope everybody is staying safe. And as we approach the end of 2020 and holiday season is already here, just big things. Look for big things from this channel. Peter's working tirelessly, likewise with myself, just to put out some content for everybody. So we'd love just any feedback or anything you'd like us to do. We're all for it. We're all for it.
Yes, indeed. And with that, I think we'll call it a day.
We'll call it a day. And this has been the Anox Podcast. Thank you for watching and listening to the great debate in sports. Number one. Thank you, everyone. We love you, Christian.